Good morning, everyone. We're going to give folks just another minute here before we get started. Hey, Jose.
Good morning, Eric. Good morning from Brazil here. I'm a leader of user group Brazil, and I'm so excited to see this event.
Well, happy to have you, Jose. Thanks for attending.
Sur meeting, s'il te plaît.
Alrighty, well, it's 10:01 Eastern Standard Time, so we'll get started here. We got a lot of stuff to cover here today, but first and foremost, I want to just say a quick introduction to myself. My name is Eric Nelson. I'm the VP of Engineering over at Stylo. We are an AI partner of Zendesk. I have my CEO, Austin, here in the chat trying to help me manage any questions that we get throughout this. So today we are going to be digging in and trying to give you some tips and some instructions on how to build an AI-ready help center. We're going to have a lot of stuff to cover here today, but as we finish each section, I'll pause for a couple of questions. We can dig into anything that you guys want from there. Alrighty. So to get started, just to give an overview of the agenda here, we're first going to start with the basics. These are like the foundational blocks of like what you can be doing in your help center to get more value out of AI tooling. From there, we'll get into context search and retrieval, article structure, content tips, localization and language tips, and then Q&A from there. Q&A at the end, as I said, we'll stop at each different section, but that's for anything that like we might not have covered throughout the extent of the other part of the session. So today's goal, as I said, is just trying to prepare your help center for use with AI tooling. This can mean a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different, areas of AI. For the most part, you're going to see me focusing in on response generation. So a lot of this is for folks that are using like Zendesk AI or another vendor in the space, allowing for you to get more out of utilizing your help center as a context source for those responses getting generated. But there's also other areas such as like, just being able to source relevant articles to your team members, as well as like being able to assist with like co-pilot type solutions. All of the steps that we are taking here today are going to be relevant for pretty much everything within the AI space. So we're going to start with just like giving a quick overview of a scenario that we're going to be doing. This is definitely a real company, definitely not something that I created, called Frogo, which is a frozen yogurt delivery company. And we're going to be helping them with modifying and updating an article so that it can be better used for content ingestion. So you'll be seeing me reference this article and then what we can be fixing on it throughout the rest of the session here today. So digging into the basics here. So these are things that, we will be talking about and we'll be building on top of for the remainder of this session here. But first and foremost is going to be when you are thinking about a help center that is good for machines as well as for your humans. I'm actually going to pause here for a second, make sure we're recording. Great, we are. Awesome. So we're going to want to have minimal images and videos in your articles. The reasoning for this is that despite the advancements that have been made in large language models, for the most part, they are all based around text. Images and videos do not really give them the contextual information that they need to be able to generate responses or surface relevant information from there. If we find the need to be able to, or to use images and videos in your articles, we need to make sure that we are following, accessibility guidelines, otherwise known as WCAG, using ARIA labels and descriptions throughout these. This will also allow our AI to be able to get the necessary information appropriately. Digging into structured formatting here. So this kind of sounds like, just like a basic information here, but making sure that your titling and your subheadings of your articles are always as clear as an understanding as possible. So when we think of an article title that might not be great, something like frequently asked questions won't be as useful is something of in regards to frequently asked questions about frozen yogurt delivery services. And then we want to utilize bullet points and numbered lists as much as possible. The reasoning for this is it gives AI the understanding of the steps and like the process of how to ingest the information, and then being able to cross-reference that against the question that it is using to be able to find the relevant information much more appropriately. And then we, of course, want to apply this consistent formatting across all of your content. Getting into granular content segmentation. So try to keep your articles all about one topic. Something that we've noticed is that users often have a tendency to try to slam as much information as humanly possible all into one article. That would, definitely be useful for just being able to have a very small help center. But in regards to AI, you're then providing a bunch of irrelevant contextual information that then it's going to have a tendency to use in responses. That's just not useful. Also, using short paragraphs allows for you to be able to pull out the direct segments that are very useful for for the response generation from there. And then lastly, the combination of using multiple categories and sections is definitely going to allow for you to have a better experience. But then specifically, try to keep your sections to a maximum of 10 articles. This will allow for the searching of the contextual retrieval process to be able to find the articles more effectively. So digging into that contextual search and retrieval processes, this is is known as a lot of different things. In regards to response generation, you may have heard of it referenced as RAG, otherwise known as retrieval augmented generation. But no matter what your LLM and your AI tooling is doing, it pretty much is broken down into these few steps here. So we have the question that is getting asked to the AI system. A question that would be response generated would be like, how do I, change my password? Or if it's trying to find relevant articles, find me 10 relevant articles about getting a refund. It then goes into a retriever process, which pulls information out of its context sources. In this case, we're going to be talking all today about your help center. Gets fed back into the large language model and then creates a response from there. So how can we actually use this? How are some tips that we can be doing to be able to make this more effective? Keeping each of your articles as unique as possible is going to improve your context search vastly. Something that we see that people often get confused about is that keeping an article structure and keeping consistent formatting in your help center means that they should be as close to the same as possible. So they always start with the same phrase or something like that. All of that is actually incorrect. You want to try to have it be as unique as humanly possible. Try not to have overlapping terminology. Try to not have overlapping steps of different articles. So, like an article that might be for how to change your password for different systems. That should all try to be condensed and refined into very different articles. Otherwise, you're going to have steps that are getting grabbed from different context sources. And that's not ideal because then that would be considered like a hallucination in a lot of ways. We should also have the title should effectively capture like the purpose of the article. As I mentioned, frequently asked questions isn't super valuable, but frequently asked questions about frozen delivery services or order tracking or something like that. It allows for the AI to understand the purpose of the article much more effectively. Digging into the prerequisites, if you let's say that you have very long form content, this is a tutorial or something of that nature. You need to try to provide that information at the beginning of the article. If you go to developer.zendesk.com, this is a great place to be able to see like a way that this is done quite well. In their tutorials there, if it's more than it's a multi-part series, it will always start at the top of the article with something to the effect of, this is part 2 in a 3-part series or something like that. That's going to allow for the AI to understand that, this information is part of a larger basis. So then it might reference the link to the previous article, something like that. It usually will help you to be able to get a better response from there. Awesome. And then if your product name is a common word, try to avoid using those, using that word or its synonyms in an article for other purposes. To kind of put this back on ourselves, so one of our products is called Stylo Assist. Assist is a very, very common word. Great, I'll get into the questions here in just a quick second. But so like Stylo Assist, like assist is a very common word. Synonyms for it are things like help. Trying to write articles that don't have those pieces in it is very difficult. So we'll talk about how to solve for that here in the next slides. But it's something to try to avoid as much as possible when you're building out new products, new features. That this will cause like response generation to be like slightly worse, unless you're providing like definitions of that area. All right, I'm going to get into a couple of questions here real quick. Yeah, so Terry, I will be sharing these slides after the fact here. So John, in regards to the reference article that I mentioned, so this was for bullet point number 3. If you're part of a 3-part series or something, try to start out the article with a reference to the previous article that is part of it. That's going to allow for you to have that link there that then the response generation can use to say, this is information from a larger tutorial. You might find more valuable information in the previous article that you can find a link to here. Yes, and the recording will also be shared. Thanks, Aaron. And then should the article name be like a question? For example, should it be how do I reset my password or how to reset your password? This is something that we don't have enough information around on which is the appropriate way to handle it. We find that questions often in regards to context retrieval don't really matter. But in regards to how the response is generated, you might find that it utilizes the question verbatim and repeats it back to the customer if you phrase your articles as such. I find it better to work with statements, though this is very much like model specific. So I would definitely try playing around with it and see like what works best for your company. Lovely. So we're going to get into our scenario that we have here and some improvements that we can make to the article. So this is all for our context retrieval tips here. First and foremost, I'm going to start on the left-hand side and work to the right. So you see that at the bottom of this article, we have a small FAQ. We should be compiling this FAQ into one for each of our individual sections and try to have all of the different questions that could possibly be asked about the articles from there within. That allows for you to be able to have your context retrieval process when it is something that falls within like a frequently asked question area. Always provide that in, which might be able to give it a little bit more contextual basis. By providing it here in the article, you're not going to be able to have it pull it unless this article in specific is pulled. Often what we find is when providing an FAQ article on each of the individual sections, it allows for that to be pulled in as a context source as well as any of the individual articles. Especially as models get larger with their token and context windows, it allows for us to be able to provide more information to be able to get better responses from there. Next, we're going to go over to the right-hand side. And, signed in users is what we have for the user segment here. That's totally fine for the case that, for the use case that we have. But we should be really making sure that we set the appropriate user segment appropriately. And also, if you're using a vendor created tool, or something that's home baked, make sure that your article and your context retrieval processes are only based around the articles that the agent or the customer that you're interacting with would have access to. Otherwise, they're going to be getting contextual information or responses that are generated for information that they have no access to. Lastly, labels is a plan locked feature. It's available on most plans, but some of the legacy ones it's not. But if you provide these in your articles, it's going to help with the context retrieval process greatly. A couple of little tips that you can have for this is like if you link your Google Analytics to your Help Center, you can start seeing what the searches your users are using to try to find articles, and then you can start utilizing that to be able to add into the labels. That's going to help for the human aspect as well as the machine aspect. Great question, Nikki. So I'll answer Nikki's question in the chat first before I get into Alex's here. So Nikki asks, what's the difference between content tags and labels? So content tags at the bottom of an article that has content tagging attached to it, you will see links to those individual articles that have those search terms attached to it. So it is a way of like essentially surfacing relevant resources to end users, but it's not ingestible by machines, so it's not very valid. Labels is something that actually increases the weight of the search algorithm that Zendesk uses to be able to surface different information. So by utilizing labels, you're going to more impact the search, which will help with your context retrieval as well as your customers, searching processes that they have with your help center. While content tagging is for only seeing relevant articles to it while actually on the article, but isn't for the most part going to be able to be used by machines. Just going to take a drink of my coffee here real quick. Great. Can you train the model to treat certain terms or names under a general concept? And when there's ambiguity, does the chatbot ask to define what the user is looking for? You can definitely train for that. I'm going to be doing a session here in the coming months about fine-tuning systems, but that's not something that we're going to be really covering here today. Doing it from an article perspective, very difficult to do. What I find will be are some of the successful ways of doing it to at least lean the AI or the chatbot in the right direction. We'll be talking about in the following slides here. I do 3P bots. I'm not familiar with 3P, Harper, but Harper's question is, do 3P bots ingest labels, or is this only pertinent? Oh, third party. Thank you, Harper, appreciate it. Do third-party bots ingest labels, or is this only pertinent to Zendesk chatbots? It's going to be vendor specific, definitely done by Zendesk AI. A lot of the other bots and Copilot solutions, AI services in the space all will use labels, but it's going to be kind of a case-by-case basis. Alrighty, so I'm going to answer Larissa's question here as my last one before I move on to the next section, just because we do have quite a bit of stuff here to cover here. So I need to exclude specific articles from the bot, but couldn't figure out any way to do this. For the suggested articles bot, for email replies, this worked via the tags, but I really need to be able to do this for the support for the chatbot as well. Support couldn't help. Do you have an idea? Unfortunately, Larissa, if support wasn't able to help you, I'm assuming you're working with Zendesk AI. It's not going to be really something that I can be able to assist you with. What I can say is that I would try creating a user segment that is specific to actual like customers that doesn't have access to the bot, or that the bot can't access. That might be something that that Zendesk AI might be able to assist you with. So I would try setting up an individual user segment for it, and then see if that helps lean it in the right direction. Okay, Emily asks, and this really will be my last question here. Apologies, everybody. Will the bot pull information from restricted articles, agent or admin view only? It's going to depend on the vendor and the offering that they have. It's going to be like Zendesk AI for the most part is whatever the user has access to will be articles that are surfaced. A lot of the other vendors in the space have tried to match that as well, but have the ability to enable the bot to be able to access information that it wouldn't be able to otherwise. It's going to be kind of a case by case basis. If you're using Zendesk AI, I definitely suggest opening a ticket with them to be able to get into that. But if not, your vendor should be able to answer that appropriately for you. Beautiful. Thanks so much, Austin. Appreciate you. All right, we're going to dig into the article structure now. So few of the tips that we have around this, and these are going to be things that if people are have been members of the Zendesk AI user group for quite some time, will have probably heard me talk about ad nauseum, so apologies in this regard, but I feel like it's still important to say. AI hallucinations increase greatly when the content that it is using for its contextual basis is less than 100 words. If you think about it, if you have and you're expected to write a novel about a topic and you only have 100 words to go off of, and that is just your seed of information, you're going to have to make up a lot of stuff to be able to get to whatever the essay or novel length that you need to. I'm sure all of us remember trying to meet 12,000 words in an art in an essay when we were in school or something of that nature. AI is very similar in that aspect. giving it a larger bandwidth of words and of content to be able to work off of for its contextual basis will allow for you to be able to have better responses. We do find that it starts to get confused over 500 words in length, though. Now, this is getting better as context window length has gotten larger with AI models and as models have continued to progress. But still, to this point, we find that the sweet spot is somewhere between 350 to 450 words per article. If you're getting longer than that, also, your customers and the humans that are actually ingesting the articles and trying to self-service themselves are going to have a higher abandonment rate. Like we usually see about every 100 words, it goes up by like 1.3% that the abandonment, how quickly they'll leave the article. So trying to keep it between 350 to 450 words is definitely going to be best. Structure is incredibly important to an LLM. Despite that, AI often has trouble with complex tables, so try to avoid them. So if we think about a table of information in your article, something very basic, 3 columns of information where it's just Boolean values saying like, on plan levels, of growth, you get access to this and you get access to that. But on the team plan, you don't, or something like that. That's easy enough for an AI to be able to understand, but a lot more complex where there's nuances to those tables or it's based off of other information, it's just going to lose it and it's going to start to hallucinate very, very quickly. A way that you can get around this is, once again, as I said, following accessibility guidelines for the web. So if you guys go look, and I'll have this in the follow-up materials as well, the column descriptions and the table descriptions process and labels that you can add for ARIA um, will allow for AI also to be able to better understand the purpose of that table. That's going to be something that's a little bit more specific on a tool by tool basis. But if it has access to that information, it's definitely going to be more successful. If not, providing a description of what the table is used for and the information that is in it is going to allow for the AI to kind of sort itself out in regards to the tokens that it finds there within the table. Lastly, focus on one topic per article. Use clear transitions between different parts of that topic. Often, as I said, even in our example, we had numerous different things. We had an FAQ, additional items, a numbered list. All of that was pretty much about the same topic, but we could be better about how we actually transition the information from one piece to the next. Numbered lists work very, very well along with bullet points. If for some reason you don't have the ability to do that, or you find that your readers don't enjoy that, try to use like transitional statements like, next you will go to the forgot password page, things of that nature will work very well for the AI or the LLM processes that you have or that you're using to be able to get the understanding of like, we're moving on to a next step. We can go from there. Great. So we're going to review our article again and see how we did well and how we didn't here. So the title really encapsulates the purpose of the article. It's just for tracking deliveries. And we have some great step-by-step instructions. The additional information, now this is something that I feel very strongly about. Providing this section here in your articles is going to allow for your AI to understand that this is an optional section. This is information it doesn't need to utilize every time in response generation, but it is something that it might find relevant and it might be useful in certain situations. By being able to separate out into a different area where like, hey, like this might be valuable information for you to have, is good for your actual readers, your customers, as well as machines. Great. Alrighty. So we're going to be moving on here to content tips. I'm going to take a moment to look at the chat here. All right, so we're going to answer Alex's question here. How does the AI handle video content, especially if it's embedded in an article? I.e., does it provide the video or link to the video or just link to the article? It's going to be kind of dependent on the platform itself, whatever tooling you're using. What I would say is, for the most part, videos are the bane of AI's existence. It doesn't understand that what it is. It doesn't understand the format at all. It can't pull any information out of it without you guys spending an arm and a leg and building a lot of homegrown solutions. What I would suggest is that try to put some sort of disclaimer around the video. And I can't think of a great way to do this in an article. So if anyone comes up with a great idea for it, I'd love to hear it. To try to allow the bot to understand that this video is like what the purpose of it is. And then if there is, if it's an external source, so in Alex's example, it's an embedded link or something, trying to provide a description in that embedding will allow for the AI to be able to possibly, and not all the time, provide a link directly to the video. Alrighty, great. So gonna answer Harper's question here real quick and we'll move on to content tips. Oh, Harper's just given a great answer there. So thanks so much for that. Beautiful. So moving on to some content tips here. So some quick and easy ones here for y'all. Consistent use of preferred terminology throughout your help center is going to allow the AI to maintain context and then generate relevant responses. So we had some questions in the in the chat earlier about fine tuning. How can we train a model to be able to respond with the terminology, the phrasing that we like, and using it continuously and consistently throughout your help center is the best method to be able to do this without going through and actually fine tuning a model to do that. It will try to always utilize the tokens, the words that are utilized throughout the help center and the content that it is using in the retrieval process before it starts using synonyms and things of the sort. If you're working with a vendor or a homegrown solution, something that you can ask them to do is to try to increase the logit bias, and I'll put that in the chat here, to a greater value in regards to certain terms. So like if you have like a blacklist or something that you can put together of terms like we never say refund, things like that, ask your vendor to work with them to try to find those words and those phrases that like should always be replaced with another word or something. So if you're, if you are in active contact with a vendor or your engineering or team or something, ask them if you can work with the logic bias in regards to choosing preferred terminology. So I'll just put that here in the chat. Lovely. Moving on to number 2 here, explicit definitions for product jargon. So as I mentioned, our example of our own product Silo Assist, assist is such a common word and everything. If you're not providing a description of what that is, it's going to think of it as like stylo help or something of that sort. You're going to have a tendency for the synonym to be raised higher in the token value range, which is not anything that you want. So by being able to say like Stylo Assist is our co-pilot solution or something will allow for you to be able to get a better idea for that. Zendesk is very, very good in their own documentation about this. If you look at things like Zendesk Explore, if you go and look through all of their articles around that, you're going to see that it references reporting and reporting toolkit, things of that nature, pretty heavily, because it allows for their bots to be able to understand that like, Zendesk Explore is, Zendesk's reporting offering. There's other ways that you can get around this, fine tuning, things of that nature. But as a quick and easy way, if you're using a vendor provided tool set, try to provide a short description around something. So, if you were Atlassian, Confluence is our, documentation software offering, something of that nature. It will also help your customers to be able to like maybe who stumble across the, that article to be able to understand like what the article is about as well. If possible, if you're working in like a very complex scenario or a area of your product that is only like difficult to understand, try to provide an example scenario of when this article would be used. So let's say that you offer like a credit-based system for your frozen yogurt delivery service. If you wanted to, but it's only valid at certain locations or something, try to provide an example if possible in the article to state that like, hey, if you ordered, 16 frozen yogurts from our 4th Street location in the month of July, this article is for you. Something like that is going to allow for the AI systems to be able to have the contextual basis to understand that this is only for people that have been to the 4th Street location in the month of July and have ordered 16 frozen yogurts. Things of that nature are going to really help for the AI to get a better understanding of the nuances of when to use different parts of contextual information. If you don't have the ability to do that, or articles are too complex for that, I would suggest, if your vendor allows for it, to have some sort of no indexing label, or like a bot don't use this article uh, flag or label on it, because you're going to have a tendency to have it get utilized too often when it's not the right situation to use it. So it's best for, at this moment in time, until models get better, to try to just avoid those kinds of complex situations altogether. And lastly, let's try to aim for a 7th grade reading level. Now, there's been some recent studies, some recent reports that have come out that say that, some of the new models that have come out from like OpenAI and Google have more in the range of like an 8th to 9th grade reading level. 7th is just great. A 7th grade reading level is good across the board. You don't have to worry about being model specific or model restrained, and allows for it to always use direct and simple language for explaining concepts. There are some different scoring processes that you can use, like Kincaid is a great example of that, to be able to get a better understanding of if your article is like a 7th grade reading level, an 8th grade reading level, uh, a tenured professor reading level, things of that nature. So try to keep it as simple as you can. It's going to allow for you to not only be able to have AI be able to generate responses off of it and understand the nuances of it a little bit more effectively, but it's also going to help your customers. Simpler is just better for all self-service processes. Great. I'm going to take a break here for a few minutes, see if anybody has any questions that they'd like to dig into. Great. All right, we'll move on over here to see what improvements we can be making to this. So in this article, we have great step-by-step pieces of telling you exactly how to log in, how to track your delivery, and things like that. When we get into the view tracking section, we see that we can check the status, and we have a description of order confirmed, out for delivery, delivered. These are all pretty self-explanatory. This is below a 7th grade reading level. These are things that don't actually have to be explained. I would suggest actually just even removing these altogether. The order status itself is going to be something that when when your customer looks at it, they're going to understand that order was confirmed. Cool, I just placed the order. It's out for delivery, and then if it's been delivered, they obviously either have frozen yogurt or don't. So it's really not necessary. But the main improvement we can make to this article is avoid saying contact support, or even including this step altogether if need help. The reasoning for this is, let's say that we are using an AI chatbot or something, and it's helping this user work through how to track their delivery, and then it says, if you have any issues, reach out to support. Well, that's a pretty jarring experience. Like, you're already contacting support, you're already in an active conversation with support. That's going to be something that isn't going to be useful, and is one of those little pinpricks that people don't like when working with bot-like technologies. So try to avoid that kind of stuff. Try to avoid anything that an actual agent wouldn't say in your articles, because otherwise the bot, the AI service, is going to say it, and that's going to lead to a higher rate of dissatisfaction from your users. A better way to handle this I would say, just remove everything after view tracking in this article in regards to the numbered steps. Appreciate that, Harper. I'm sure any of you that have accidentally had that in your articles have seen this, that it is not a great thing to have. Contact support, reach out to support, anything of that sort. Your customers will not like it because they are actively in a conversation with them. All right, digging into our last section here, I'm going to first answer the few questions we have in the chat here. So Joe asks, what if you want to redirect a more complex question to a human? In some of our articles, we tell people to type talk to a human when they are asking about something that requires a human. That's a great question, Joe. It's going to be it's going to be kind of a case by case basis. I would say if you have an article like that, you would most likely have to handle it in the process, like I was talking with a logit bias or some sort of blacklisting process for the AI service. So you would have to blacklist every version of contact support, reach out to support, talk to a human, things of that nature, so that it never gets brought up in the bot's response generation. You're going to have to play around with it quite a bit. I can't think of any great solutions off the top of my head, but I'll give it a little bit more thought. Maybe somebody else in the chat will have some good ideas as well. Great. Erica, I saw you came off of mute. Do you have any questions?
I do not, sorry.
You're all good. Apologies for calling you out like that. Awesome. We'll move on to localization and language here. If anybody has any more questions, we're going to be coming up to the Q&A session here at the end. Feel free to either come off of mute to be able to ask your questions or just drop them in the chat. Austin and I will try to get to them as quickly as we can. Getting into language and localization tips. So this is going to sound really silly, and I really hate this, and it's such an American way of looking at things, but you really have to keep an English locale of your help center no matter what. Even if you have no customer base in the United States or any English, English focused country, if you are utilizing AI-based technologies, you must keep an English help center. Almost every one of the major models, there's a couple in Sweden, one in Japan currently, but outside of those are all trained on English content. Their token creation process, their localization process, their translation processes, all are built on top of that, but be able to understand the contextual information that is in the article so that it can generate a better response. That's all going to be done in English. So because of that, you need to make sure that you have a one-to-one of whatever your actual main primary language is to your English content. And then you should try to have your bot utilize your English-based content as its contextual source every single time. I hope at some point in the future that won't be the case, that we'll have the resources and computing power will be low enough and we'll have enough content to be able to train off of, that we can have individual language based from there. But until then, really try to always keep a one-to-one and always keep an English locale of your help center up to date. It's going to way help with the compatibility with all of the major models and all of the different AI tooling. Number two is, avoiding using slang or idioms. It's going to be, a good example of this would be, I should have also included acronyms, because if it's something that is very industry specific or it is slang that is like not commonplace, it's not going to understand it. So if it hasn't made it into the Webster's dictionary yet in regards to slang, don't use it in your articles. If it's an acronym or something, try to spell out the actual words. This will allow for the AI to be able to generate much more effectively off of that. It's very similar to product jargon. It's not going to understand what it is unless you tell it what it is. And lastly, ensure the appropriate level of formality in your localized content. If you're using a context source for response generation or article creation, anything of this sort, if it has to do with the formatting, the tonality, and the style that you have of your articles is going to get translated into the response generation that is happening. If you have a very bubbly, marketing focused pattern and format and style to your help center articles, that's going to come through to your help center or in your responses that are getting generated via bots and such. Try to avoid that at all possible. If it is a different voice between like what you have externally and what you have internally, try to have everything be consistent and match across the board, because it's going to have a hard time adjusting to it. You can add a ton of different things to your prompts. If you're doing a homebrewed solution or a vendor that allows you to add your own custom prompts, but if not, it's always going to utilize that same tone. Yeah, you probably have seen like Zendesk AI has a couple of offerings like be more friendly, be more empathetic, things of that nature. That's even very difficult to be able to do when the basis of the content that's pulling from has a big voice to it itself that might be in a different direction. So what I always suggest is try to keep your content, unfortunately, as dry as humanly possible, unless you're ready for your AI responses to be super friendly and bubbly and using emojis nonstop. Uh, it's going to be much easier to work off of a dry, plain text basis than it is to start with something that is like super, super friendly, and then all of a sudden you're trying to make it very business-like. So just try to always match that content and the tone of it to whatever its purpose is going to be for the response generation. All right, we got quite a few questions here in the chat, so I'm going to dig into these. Mark, you will be getting a recording of this webinar as well as a link to the slide deck. Can you explain the slang in an article? I'm thinking, what if the slang is part of the voice of your brand? Games as an example. That's totally fine. If it's part of the voice and everything, it's very similar to what I was talking about the tonality. But it's important that the slang is understood by the model and by the responses that are, or the LLM that is creating a response or whatever it is doing. So try to provide a description of it, or make sure that it makes contextual sense in the sentence. If it is a slang that is something like that is very specific to gamers on your platform, you might need to do some fine tuning to be able to get it to understand it correctly, as well as to utilize that slang appropriately in the response generating. Will the rules for the articles bot article sharing be the same as for the AI chat? Often they will be. Yeah, it's going to be kind of setting specific, and vendor specific, but for the most part, they will be a one-to-one. All right, Elaine says we have some hard-coded HTML JavaScript elements in specific articles. Will these confuse the AI or will it ignore them? It's going to be very dependent on the system, what tool you're utilizing. For the most part, all of that's going to get stripped down to just the plain text of it. There might be another opportunity for you to be able to, if you have the ability to adjust prompts or something, to give it exact instructions of what it should do when it comes across those pieces. But for the most part, it's going to just strip it down to the plain text. So if it doesn't make sense without all of the divs and the lists that are from the HTML, it's going to have some struggles. So I would suggest maybe a good option for you would to be have a customer facing article and then a private article that is hidden into a particular user segment that is just used for response generation from bots or something. All righty. So digging into the improvements that we can make, only one real big one here to make, and that is froyo is actually slang. Especially as we think about if this article was to be utilized and then translated into a different language, froyo most likely would be something that doesn't make a ton of sense or wouldn't translate appropriately. So either the froyo will stay as that, which might confuse some of our customers from other countries, where we are just starting to move our frozen yogurt delivery service into, or it's going to have issues altogether. A better option would be to actually just replace it with frozen yogurt. Very similar to what we were just talking about. If froyo is something that is absolutely paramount to your brand, to the essence of your company, which kind of in the sense of froyo might be, then we might want to do some adjustments and play around with it to see if we understand, or if we can get the bot to understand what froyo is. And then from there, translation processes, response generation processes will happen appropriately. Beautiful. Well, that's everything we had today. This is kind of just a high level overview of some of the things that you can be doing in your help center to try to get more out of it, get it ready for AI. I'm happy to take some time now, either whether in the chat or for people to come off of mute, ask whatever questions that you have in regards to anything help center related, how we can be making improvements to try to get it ready for AI or to make improvements to your AI processes you already have. All right, Wendy asks, in a troubleshooting article, if the tips don't resolve the client's issue and support requires specific details from the client, should we include the instructions for contacting support with that information in the article? Yeah, that would be a good way of doing it. So if you say, if if this article hasn't resolved your issue, um, some of the information that support will ask of you will be this, this, and this. Phrasing it something like that instead of telling them contact support will allow for the bot to understand the nuances that this is like an additional information section or criteria that it needs to be able to take the next actionable steps. Um, you're going to have to play around with it a little bit. It's going to be very much specific to the tool that you're using, how those prompts are written, how the response generation process is looking. But you're going to have a much more effective way of having it avoid it saying reach out to support. It will actually understand a little bit more effectively that it just needs the information to ask for the information from there. You might also, instead of doing it in that process, have a linked article, something of that nature, where it talks about that information, what is necessary to be able to troubleshoot this issue. That could possibly get you a better response as well. No worries, Wendy. Thanks for asking such a great question. All right. Well, we are 2 minutes past our time here. I'm going to give just a couple more moments for people that want to stick around for any questions that we have here. First, going to dig into Harper's here. Any tips on how to omit certain lines of text in an article from bot ingestion without omitting the content of the entire article? Yeah, that would actually, a great way for you to be able to do that would be to utilize having to work through this one here in real time here. If you have the capabilities of your bot to not have it just ingest plain text, have it have the ability to access different sorts of elements, you could utilize an ID structure in the p tags of your HTML to be able to have it omit those certain lines before it even gets to the context retrieval process. That's something that's like for a homebrewed solution or from a vendor that you might be working very closely with. A lot of the large systems or large systems probably won't have that capability, but might be something you could do. Another way, if you have the ability to give custom instructions to the bot, would be able to say, if a sentence is started with this phrase, omit it, like never include it, something of that sort, which in itself would allow for you to clean it out. The majority of the ways that you would want to do it would be essentially having some sort of identifier that either then the LLM understands it needs to strip that information out and not use it as a contextual basis, or a pre-processing system which then is actually doing that before it goes in from there. Happy to help, Harper. Lovely. So I'll stick around here for one more question if anyone has it. Looks like Elaine's got one here. There are some good instructions in the, oh, that's great to see. Thanks, Elaine. Great call out. Lovely. Well, in that case, we've had a lot of really great conversation here today. We've had a ton of great questions. As follow-ups, you will be receiving the recording of this once it gets posted on YouTube from the Zendesk community team. Additionally, in the user group, the Zendesk AI user group, you're now going to find at the bottom of that page a little section where you can have conversations with myself, with Austin, with anybody from the community or from the AI community to be able to ask these questions there. Additionally, you can always feel free to reach out to me, whether it be via the user group, LinkedIn, anything of the sort. I'm always happy to talk AI, but just want to thank everybody. We had a great session here today, and I hope to see you all in our next one, which is going to be in 2 weeks, and it's just going to be a discussion session. Lovely. All right. Thanks, everybody.